Today we are going to be replacing the solenoid in an Ultranova bidet seat. So before you start, obviously you are going to want to unmount your Ultranova from your toilet and find a good area to work on it. Next, a couple of tools you'll want are like a small electric screwdriver, or a hand one will work well too. A pry tool. Some tweezers can be handy for this job, not a requirement, but does make a certain step easier. And some needle nose pliers. If you have zip ties handy, this would be recommended, but not required. So to start, we're gonna flip our seat over, and there are going to be 7 screws to undo on this one. If you have a newer model Ultranova with a nightlight, there will be an extra screw that goes right here in the middle of the seat by the nozzle. This So for these back two in the corner, these two are slightly smaller, so keep those separate from the other screws. Okay, now that we've unscrewed the lower, we are going to take a plastic pry tool. Usually you only need one of these for this, but if you're having extra difficulty with it, a second one can be handy. My recommendation is to start along the front. You can sometimes grab like right by the dryer here and just kind of pry up. And as you're pulling up, take your pry tool and go to one of these tabs on the side. So pull up and it'll just pop out like that. Go to the other side and repeat. Now the front is going to be disconnected, but you don't want to pull yet because you have these other tabs in the back. So what you're going to do is take this pry tool and push it in there, push that away and kind of twist and lift. And then do that again, push and twist. And that will remove the lower from the upper. There are these little tabs right here that keep everything like centered and lined up on the back at the seam. So you want to make sure you don't break those off. Okay, now that we have this separated, we can start working on removing the old solenoid. This is our solenoid right here. And we've got a couple of hoses we're going to have to disconnect. But before we do that, we're going to remove a couple screws. There are 4 screws right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll start with those. This part comes out like so. You can keep that together. These next 2 right here. And then there are 2 more. One that goes right here and one that goes back there. So now this is disconnected. We've got 1 more screw for this grounding wire and hose piece right here. It's the little tiny one. So now our solenoid is free. We can start removing it by taking this hose off right here. We can just leave this in place. It's not going to go anywhere. And then we have a little hose clamp right down in there. And this is where we're going to take our pliers. You're going to squeeze the hose clamp and then slide it out of the way. Now you have this hose that runs right here. You can take your pry tool and you can just kind of loosen it that way if it's giving you difficulty. Once you start it, it should just pull off with a little tug. Like so. There's going to be a zip tie looped on this hose here. I would recommend leaving this. You can cut it if you want, but there's no reason to cut it. So now we have these 2 wires right here that run to our main PCB. By our PCB, there is a zip tie. If you have a pair of scissors handy, I would say you should cut this one, and this will make more sense after when we go to reinstall the new part. So we're going to cut that zip tie. And now there is a yellow connector right here, a 2-pin yellow connector. This right here is our solenoid. When replacing the bad part, you can just cut this. So now the solenoid, you can just give this a pull and that'll just come out like so. And this is our old solenoid part right here. This just makes the removal process quicker. And if it's a bad part, you don't need to worry about like breaking anything. So yeah. Now that we got that removed, our next step is going to be installing the new part. To do this, and what we have found works best for this unit is we remove the nozzle part way and run our solenoid wire underneath the nozzle. All of the wires run underneath the dryer as well, but you do not need to do that. That would be a lot of extra work that is not necessary for this repair. So to start, before we do anything else, we will unscrew our nozzle. And there are 3 nozzle screws. 1, 2, and 3. So we can just set our solenoid here. We don't have to have it perfectly in place just yet. We'll run our wire first. So this yellow connector, we're going to take, run it under those hoses right here. And the nozzle we can just pick up. And there is a space in here. Run this wire under all the hoses, like so. There's little tabs on the bottom of the chassis to hold the wire in place. So we have that kind of where we want it for the most part. Take the slack you need. So now that we got our wire run, you can take the nozzle and secure it back in place with the 3 screws it has. Again, this is just what we have found works best for running this wire. It gets it out of the way, it protects it, and it's also avoiding the hassle of trying to remove the dryer as well. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take our wire, and I like to give it a little wrap around this post. This puts a little bit of tension on it so that it doesn't get caught up in the nozzle or any other moving parts. So just a little wrap right there. And then we're going to take it and plug it into this yellow connector right here. If you have that zip tie handy, and you don't have to have one, but if you do have one, I'd recommend going through and just taking these wires, bundle them together, and just tighten them all up. It keeps them neat. Okay, our next step will be reinstalling the solenoid. So what's easiest is to get this hose right here with this clamp. While this is still loose and not secured to the seat, we're going to take this end of the hose and go into this part on the solenoid here. Solenoid wire can run underneath this. Once you get that hose pressed on by hand all the way, take your pliers, grab the hose clamp, and slide it back over the fitting, like so. Pretty easy. The next step will be securing the solenoid to the lower part of the bidet. So this hose runs here and around, and we've got this grounding wire that also runs on the left-hand side of it. There's the zip tie, as I mentioned earlier. What you're going to do with that zip tie is you're going to push it over this part of the solenoid here, and this helps hold the hose down. If you cut the zip tie, don't worry, you can always replace it. It just keeps things neat and out of the way. We're going to grab one of our screws, and we're going to start by going with this one right here. You don't want to use too much torque screwing this back together because you are using metal screws into plastic, and plastic will strip out if you use too much torque. Like so. We're going to take our little screw for this brass piece. A little bit. There we go. And then two more screws. 1 and 2. Our next step will be taking this hose right here and fit it onto here. Like so. There's no hose clamp for that one. Now we've got our inlet cover. And there's 2 screws for that. Drop that on there, tighten it down. Just like that. At this point now we can just double check to make sure we have everything hooked up correctly. Make sure all the wires are tucked away neatly so they're not going to get caught on anything. We don't want stuff to get caught on the nozzle mechanism as it actuates. All of our wires look good. Hoses look good. Nothing's kinked. All good stuff to check because you don't want to put this together and realize something's wrong and you have to take it apart again. So something to take your time with, not to rush, and it'll all be easy. Solenoid should sit at an angle like this. This is so it doesn't hit anything in the upper housing. Now that we have this all put back together, snap it back into one piece. What I like to do is I like to start with the back of this. So what you're going to do is you're going to line these little tabs up down here. And you're going to basically push in with your thumb and push down like that. Very easy. And then just go along the side and the front. And it'll all be back together. Now we're going to take our 2 odd screws that are smaller and put them in these 2 corners. Just make them snug. They don't have to be crazy tight. And then the rest of the screws can be installed like so. These are all the same, so there's no particular order which they have to go in. And there you have it. That is how you replace the solenoid on an Ultranova bidet.